how can I believe in something I can't even see? And what about science? Does it mean faith isn't real? It's okay to have questions. Actually, it's good to have questions. This series is about asking the hard questions and discovering a faith that makes sense.
I don't know about you, but man, I do not like books. Books are just so dumb. I grew up thinking that these stupid rectangular things made of paper with ink on them are just such obsolete, inefficient ways to get information, especially when there's movies and the internet. Like, those things exist. Why would I waste time on a book? You know what I'm talking about? Especially, like, look, Harry Potter was a thing when I was younger. Why would I spend 17.13 hours reading a book, Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when I could just knock it out in a calm, cool 2 hours and 18 minutes by watching the movie? I mean, that just makes sense. I know I'm really triggering a lot of the book readers out there, but just hold on. Because listen, the truth is, books are boring, okay? There's not even any like sound effects, visual effects, or some of them, guys, don't even have pictures. Yeah, I've seen books out there that are just words, and sometimes the words are real small, and there's a lot of them, and I'm not trying to waste my time with that. And then, as a Christian, like, I'm growing up this is just how I felt, by the way. This is not how I feel. You don't have to leave. I'm not, dang. I've had enough of this guy. Yeah, that's just how I felt. That was a past tense. Just to be clear, I'm not this way anymore. It's a reflection of how I was. The old is gone. Behold, the new has come. But the Bible, guys, as a Christian, I remember looking at the Bible as kind of just like the most book of all time. I mean, for God's sakes, it's a book made up of books. Oh, they're back. Hey. The Bible is like this overly strict, not cool mother of all books. I mean, if you had your grandma had that big King James or something, it just looked intimidating. The thing is gigantic. I'm not trying to crack that thing open. Where do I even begin? I felt this way until the Bible came alive to me in a whole new way. And my goal with this series is not to get you to fall in love with reading. Falling in love with reading was just sort of a part of my journey, but my goal is to get you interested in the wonder and the excitement that is captured in the Bible, but how it is also reinforced by everything, everywhere, ever made, all of the time, to ever exist, past, present, and future. From the expanse of space and the universe to everything on the tiniest quantum level, considering, quantum entanglement, how science and faith in God are more interconnected than you possibly ever even imagined or have ever considered. That's my goal with this series on faith and science. My journey involved learning how to read an actual book, and I want to take you on your own, hopefully, over the next few weeks together as we hop in. So here's mine. Maybe you can relate. It began with one of the first books that I ever actually read cover to cover. It was the year 2011. I was 20 years old. I remember having never read an actual entire book, but this one, I read it and it changed my life forever. Guess which one it was? No, it wasn't the Bible at all. It was a book called The Genesis Flood, a biblical record of and its scientific implications by, you guessed it, Christian apologist and engineer, Henry M. Morris, of course. It was this book. I managed to get all the way through high school and into college without ever reading a book, Not my proudest thing. But this book changed the trajectory of my life and how I thought, and just introduced this idea of critical thinking when it came down to faith and God, Jesus, the Bible, and everything in between. The reason why it changed my life is not because I agree with everything in this book. In fact, I really don't. It changed me because I was really curious about this concept of faith and science, and I was actually taught that they are not compatible, that they cannot go together. And I want to share a little bit more about that later. Because this book right here supports a thing called young earth creationism. Young earth creationism asserts that the universe and everything in it was essentially created with the appearance of age. It's not actually as old as scientists say it is. In fact, it's probably between 6,000 and 10,000 years old. And all of the carbon dating and the geological records that say otherwise, that the earth is millions and millions of years old, like they probably teach in your secular satanic science classes, are actually wrong, and that can be explained through the catastrophic circumstances and pressures that occurred during this biblical worldwide flood mentioned in Genesis. It wasn't a gradual evolution. This whole concept, according to this book, is completely missed. It was actually an immediate thing that happened over a short period of time, is what the book says. And this is convenient because it lines up with a literal interpretation of the genealogies of the Bible and everything else in the Bible. If you look at Luke chapter 3, you can see this genealogy, which traces you all the way from Adam, who's apparently the first guy to ever live, which immediately you have problems with, right? It's like if he was the first guy and then there was Eve and then they had some kids like Cain and Abel, like who were they like reproducing with to like populate the earth? Like brothers and sisters, like that's nasty. I don't know. You don't think about it too much when you're in VBS. I'm just saying, bro. But anyway, that aside, more on that later. It's week 2. Come back next Sunday. But it goes all the way from Adam to Jesus, which is like 4,000 years-ish. And then we know that from Jesus to us, because it's been historically documented pretty well, that's about 2,000 years-ish. So that puts the creation, the age of the entire earth, right around 6,000 years. Like it has to be that way. And I thought, yes, finally a book that explains it in scientific terms. I mean, this book breaks down like molecular structures. It did a lot of scientific testing when things are put under pressure, just like they would have experienced during the flood. And I thought, oh, that makes so much sense. Like Jesus probably rode in on a dinosaur, not on a donkey. Oh. Right? This is where I was at until I read my second book. Turns out there's a whole different school of thought out there. This one was 4 years later. I know. I was slow. I was on this 24-hour journey to Nairobi, Kenya for a mission trip with my church at the time. And I heard about a book called The Language of God, A Scientist Presents Evidence for Belief. And I wanted that evidence. I wanted to see what scientists said. I wanted a different perspective because, you got to know both sides. This author isn't just a scientist like the title says. He's actually him when it comes to science. This is Francis S. Collins. He led the Human Genome Project and was a former National Institute of Health director under 3 presidents. I mean, this is at the top. Not only is Dr. Collins one of the brightest scientific minds on the planet, he's also a Christian. So I was like, how's that possible? That there's a guy who believes that the universe is billions of years old and also a Christian. Like, how does he reconcile the other book I read by Henry Morris? Like, how does this work? So on that flight, I read the entire thing. Actually, like physically reading a book with words on paper. Like, I'm not talking about listening on audio. I mean, I read, okay? Crazy. I know, you're proud of me. The thing is that Francis Collins, though, he wasn't always a Christian. He was born and he grew up an atheist, and he was absolutely, just an empirical, data-driven scientist, absolutely convinced that everything in the universe can be explained through scientific means. And he felt that way until he got so deep into the science couldn't even explain itself anymore. And he became convinced there has to be a creator. And that's what fascinated me even more and got me into reading more than 2 books every 4 years. A major contributing factor in Collins' belief in God was this human genome project that I mentioned earlier. I want to tell you what it is briefly so you'll know what I'm talking about, and I want us to try to wrap our heads around the intensity and the coolness of this project. Here's what it's all about. A single strand of DNA, which you're all made of, by the way, congratulations. One single strand, microscopic to microscopic, right? This thing contains 3 billion base pairs of nucleotides. Adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine. You're like, crap, I'm in science class again. A, T, C, and G. And these things make up the rungs in the double helix of the DNA, right? When in perfect order, remember, 3 billion pairs. They have to be in perfect order. And when they're in perfect order, they make a normal, healthy human being. And these DNA, they copy and they make you, and that's great. If one letter is off, if one base pair is off, this could result in things like cancer, disease, blindness, or maybe the person never fully forms at all. Think of the DNA like a puzzle, and you have 3 billion pieces scattered all across this floor that are like the size of a speck of sand, and you have to arrange them in a perfect order without missing one. Francis Collins and his international team of scientists in 1990 set out to start assembling and reconstructing all of that data that's in a human genome in one DNA and put it like on paper, essentially, like in a spreadsheet. So we can know, and we can detect variants, and we can help cure people of diseases if we can fix the things. But I want to put 3 billion into perspective for you real quick. If you were to type out every letter of the 3 billion pairs inside your microscopic DNA on a piece of regular computer paper, Times New Roman, 12-point font, single-spaced, normal margins, and you pressed print on your home printer, about 60 days later, you would have a stack of paper that is about as tall as the Washington Monument. And that's in one strand of DNA. Do you know how many strands of DNA you have comprising your entire body? 1.4 quadrillion. That's about how many DNA molecules are in an average adult body. If you lined those up end to end, it would reach all the way from the Earth to the sun about 200 times. 93 million miles. And for perspective, if this pickleball is the sun relative to size, all the way over here would be Earth on the tip of this little paintbrush. And it would be actually smaller than the tip. It'd be the size of a grain of sand. That's in your DNA. Thanks, Kendrick. If you were to do this for all 8 billion people on Earth, it would span the entire distance of the Milky Way galaxy. Not once, not twice, but 250 times. How many galaxies are there? About 2 trillion in the entire observable universe. This picture of the observable universe is one of my favorite images ever created. I think it's one of the landmarks of humankind. Each pixel in this picture represents a cluster of about 670 galaxies, which are made of millions and millions of suns each. And that's each pixel on this image. All of these are hundreds of light years across, meaning that the whole thing, considering the universal speed limit, which is light, took billions of years to make, scientifically speaking. Not 6,000 to 10,000 years. Suddenly we've got a problem. How can these two things both be true? I suddenly realized that all of this information in perfect order, in like the expanse of the universe and its complexity, is also represented in me. Like in the tiniest speck of my DNA, and it has to be perfect. Otherwise, there is no me, there's no us, there's nothing. We are all like little universes, which is pretty cool, that we're reflections of the giant universe that we're a part of, which is incomprehensibly large, just like the incomprehensible complexity and beauty and intentionality of everything that's inside you on a microscopic level. I just couldn't help but respond to this in worship as I'm on a plane to Kenya, realizing this, flying through the air, thinking, man, I'm so small, but I'm also so intentional. It was emotional to think that we're finely tuned in such a way and that God did it? Question mark, somehow? But by what means? Was it instantaneous or was it evolutionary? And does that change who God is? Does that change what Jesus did? Here's what I want us to do, speaking of Jesus. I want to look at the greatest commandment for a sec. You remember this one? We bring it up a lot. Jesus is asked, like, what is the most important commandment? And he's kind of being tested, and he says this, right? It's in Matthew chapter 22. He says to love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all of your mind. Now, I think that's important, and it's intentional too. Jesus is telling us to love God with all of our emotions and all of our feelings, right? But also all of our intellect. He's not saying you have to check your brain at the door if you want to become a Christian. The universe can be 13.8 billion years old, just like science suggests, and I have no problem with that. Doesn't change who God is or what Jesus did to me at all. Genesis 1:1, you're probably familiar with this too. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Listen, write this down, remember it forever. This is a description of what happened, not a description of how it happened. The Bible is not a science book, and your science book is not the Bible. There are some things in your science book that are explained that the Bible doesn't explain, can't explain it. That's not its purpose. Just like there are some things in your Bible that the science book can't explain. That's not its purpose. Every scientist will tell you there are things that they can't explain, right? These two things, they have different purposes, but they can be complementary to help explain one another, which is so fun. Let's look at something. Genesis 1, verse 3, just a couple verses later. God says this, he says, let there be light, and then there was light, and that's the first day. Remember the 6 days of creation where everyone is like, yeah, these were literal 24-hour periods of time. That's like the first book would say, because that fits within the 6 to 10,000 year mark for like the age of the earth. But what if each day was actually millions and millions of years? Well, the fun thing for me that I wanted to share with you now is this, because it blew my paradigm, was that one word, the Hebrew word for day, is yom. We translate it Y-O-M. But it can refer to any unspecified amount of time. Like when someone says, back in my grandfather's day, they're not talking about a literal 24-hour period of time. They're talking about an indefinite period of time. It could have been years. To God, it could have been millions or billions. Genesis 1:26, let us make man in our image. He starts making people, right? Or actually just one guy, as you learned in VBS, named Adam. Wrong! The Hebrew word there translated into Adam is literally the word Adam, but it's not some guy's name. It's the word Adam, which means humanity, which could have been instantaneous, could have been over the course of millions of evolutionary years. And it probably wasn't just one guy, and getting freaky with his own family or stuff. I don't know. It was a whole bunch of people that happened through these natural means that God put in place. What's wrong with that? Why can't it be that? It doesn't change my faith a bit, again, like I said. But I do remember in youth group, when I was growing up, and my youth pastor literally telling me that secular science is literally from the enemy, and it is wrong, and you will go. I remember hearing this sermon. You're going to go into high school. You're going to go into a biology class, chemistry class, physics. They're going to teach you evolution. And as a Christian, when you take a test, an exam at the end of the 6 weeks, and it asks you a question about evolution, even if the teacher tells you it's the correct answer, you know it's not. Out of your conviction and your obedience to the Lord, you put the wrong answer. That's what I was taught. I was literally told that. These two things, science and faith, can't go together. That's how my faith was formed. I want you to form a healthier faith, a more realistic one one that involves critical thinking, one that explores and is not afraid to ask questions. It wasn't until I was in my 20s that I realized this one simple phrase, and I want you to get it today. The Bible explains the purpose of creation. Science explains the process. The two actually work in this beautiful harmony with one another. When I realized that, that's when the Bible became alive to me. That's when I wanted to start to read it too. That's when all of the shame and all of the guilt that came along with reading it, because something just doesn't add up. I'm like, I want to read it, but it just seems dumb or wrong. Not true. When David, you look at the Bible, and in the Psalms, David is looking at the heavens and the stars, and he's praising God for them. Are the things that he says about the heavens and the stars scientifically accurate? No, he's not an astrophysicist. Neither am I. He's just out here worshiping God. Okay? It would be just like me trying to explain it, or me looking at a skyscraper and be like, yeah, man, there's a lot of plumbing and wires and concrete that go into that thing. It must have taken weeks to build. I don't know, but I'm still admiring a thing. Well, it can't be a lie because it's in the Bible. But people, don't even get me started. You can be a Christian and believe in evolution too. I want to just get that out there. The guy, Francis Collins, he created this organization, and it's a website now with a lot of great resources. It's called BioLogos. Look it up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about it here now, but if you want to learn more about this, visit this site, Bio, study of life, Logos, the word of God, God's word, God's world. Pretty cool, but you can be skeptical and ask questions. I just want to encourage you to do this, to go on a journey, to go on the journey, whatever it looks like for you, and don't be afraid. Because listen, God is not afraid of your questions, and you should not be afraid to ask them. In fact, I think your faith will come alive, and you'll feel a lot better about where you sit when you actually go on this pursuit. Jesus even says, if you seek me, you will find me if you seek with your whole heart. A lot of us aren't finding him because we're not seeking with our whole heart. We're giving him a little, we're giving this a little, and it's do it all. If you do this, you will join the ranks of the greatest thinkers in all of human history. People like Pascal, people like Isaac Newton, people like Galileo, people like Copernicus. You've heard of these people? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Guess what? They all have in common. They're great scientists, great thinkers, innovators that changed the landscape of humanity forever because of their discoveries and inventions and observations, and they were all Christians. All scientists, all Christians. And I want to leave you with another great quote from another great thinker who was actually not a Christian, but his IQ is off the charts, and I love these words, and I just want to meditate on them for a sec. This is Albert Einstein's words, right? He said, the most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion which stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, is as good as dead, and his eyes are dimmed. So if you read a book, whether it is Harry Potter or a science book or a Bible, or when you consider everything that makes you up, everything that makes up everything in all of existence, from the things in your front yard to your school to the globe, solar system, nebula, universe, you zoom it out and zoom it back in. May you wonder, may you marvel, and may you see God, and may you know that it and you are all a part of his marvelous creation, and it works. It works.